Welcome, friends. Today's story is not just about machines or money. It's about miracles born from kindness. It's about a man who had nothing, yet gave everything. In a small, dusty corner of the city stood an old garage, walls cracked, tools rusted and dreams fading. Inside worked a humble mechanic named Arjun. His clothes were torn. His hands were rough, but his heart was made of pure gold. Every day he repaired broken cars, yet inside he wished he could repair broken lives. One stormy afternoon, a shining black car stopped outside his garage. The door opened, and out came a woman dressed in elegance, her eyes filled with pain. Beside her sat a little girl in a wheelchair, fragile, silent, and hopeless. The woman spoke softly, her voice trembling. "My daughter hasn't walked since the accident. Doctors say it's impossible, but someone told me you fix the impossible." Arjun looked at the girl and smiled. He saw what others couldn't, the spark in her eyes still fighting to live. That night when the world slept, Arjun didn't. He worked under the flickering yellow light, cutting, welding, shaping old metal into something new. Not for money, not for fame, but because somewhere deep inside, he believed miracles were real. Days passed. His hands bled, his eyes burned with exhaustion, yet his heart kept whispering, "Don't stop now." And then came the morning that changed everything. The girl stood, trembling, shaking, but standing on the legs everyone said would never move again. Her mother gasped, falling to her knees as tears poured down her face. The girl took one small step, then another, and the whole garage filled with laughter, joy and disbelief. Arjun stood silently, his eyes moist. The mother hugged him and cried, "You didn't just fix her legs. You brought my world back to life." He smiled gently and said, "Sometimes it's not the machines we repair, it's the hearts behind them." Dear friends, this story reminds us, kindness doesn't need wealth, only a willing heart. One act of compassion can turn despair into hope, pain into joy, and darkness into light. So if this story touched your soul, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where every story breathes love, spreads humanity, and reminds us that miracles still exist. Sometimes life connects people who were never meant to meet, yet that meeting changes everything. This is one such story. The story of a mechanic with a golden heart and a girl who forgot what hope felt like. In the heart of the city, behind rows of shining cars and tall buildings, stood a small old garage. Inside, surrounded by grease and dust, worked Ravi, a poor mechanic who believed that helping others was more important than earning money. One winter morning, as fog covered the streets, a limousine stopped outside his garage. Out came a woman dressed in black, holding the hand of a little girl in a wheelchair. The girl's eyes were empty. She hadn't smiled in years. Her legs had stopped working after a tragic accident. Doctors said she'll never walk again. But Ravi looked at her, smiled softly, and said, "Maybe doctors fix bodies, but I fix hearts too." The woman didn't believe him, but desperation made her stay. That night, Ravi started working, not just on cars, but on a dream. He used broken parts, old steel rods, and his imagination to build something that could help the little girl stand again. Every spark that flew from his welding torch was like a spark of hope in the darkness. Days turned into nights, nights turned into weeks. Ravi's hands bled, his back ached, but he never gave up. Every time he saw the little girl smile even a little, it gave him new strength. Finally, one golden morning, he called the mother and the girl to his garage. He adjusted the metallic support he built with his own hands, gently helped the girl to stand, and whispered, "Believe you can, and you will." And then it happened. One trembling step, then another. The sound of her footsteps echoed like music in the quiet garage. Her mother covered her mouth in disbelief. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she saw her daughter walking after years of pain. The little girl turned to Ravi and said, "Uncle, you fixed my legs, but you also fixed my heart." Ravi smiled and replied, "No, my child, you fixed mine." The mother hugged him tightly, crying and laughing at once, and the whole garage felt like heaven itself had come down to bless that moment. Friends, remember, miracles don't always come from doctors or money. Sometimes they come from the hands of ordinary people with extraordinary hearts. Today's story is not just about kindness. It's about sacrifice, faith, and a man who gave up his own dream so that a little girl could have hers. This is the story of Irfan, a poor mechanic with a heart far richer than any billionaire. In a corner of the city stood his tiny workshop, old tools, cracked walls, and a radio that played the same sad songs every day. He lived alone, fixing broken cars and saving every penny for one dream, to buy a small house for his late parents, who once lived on the streets. But fate had something else planned. One afternoon, a shining car broke down near his shop. Out came a wealthy woman, elegant, but her eyes carried years of pain. In the back seat sat her daughter, Maya, a sweet little girl in a wheelchair. Her legs were lifeless. Her smile was gone. The woman said softly, "Money can't buy what she's lost. But someone told me you fixed the impossible." Irfan looked at Maya, and something inside him broke. He saw in her eyes the same loneliness he'd lived with his whole life. He nodded, and without asking for a single rupee began his mission. For days, he worked through hunger, pain, and sleepless nights. He searched scrapyards for metal parts, melted old bicycle frames, and shaped them into something new, a walking brace, strong yet light, built entirely from hope and love. But when it came time to fit the brace, disaster struck. His landlord came, demanding the rent he couldn't pay. He was told, "Either clear your dues or leave this place." Irfan had saved just enough money to finally buy that small house for himself. A dream he had held for years. He looked at the envelope of savings, and then at Maya, who watched him with innocent hope. That night, under the pale light of a single bulb, he took a deep breath and walked to his landlord. He handed him the entire envelope. He chose her future over his own dream. The next morning, the moment arrived. He fixed the metal brace onto Maya's legs, held her hands and whispered, "Try, little one. Don't think of falling, think of flying." Maya trembled, took one shaky step, then another, and suddenly she walked. The air filled with her laughter, her mother's sobs and Irfan's quiet tears. The woman fell to her knees, crying, "You've given my daughter back her life. How can I ever repay you?" He smiled softly and said, "Just promise me one thing. Teach her never to give up on kindness. That's all the payment I need." Months later, Maya's story went viral. She could run, dance, and play again. It was the same house he once dreamed of, built with gratitude, not money. He fell to his knees, crying, not because of the gift, but because his kindness had come full circle. Friends, sometimes the richest people in the world are not the ones with the most money, but the ones with the biggest hearts. One act of sacrifice can build a lifetime of miracles. Welcome, friends. Some stories don't just touch the heart. They carve themselves into the soul forever. Today's story is one of those rare moments where kindness becomes stronger than fate itself. This is the story of a poor mechanic named Rahim, and how his final act of love changed a family's life forever. Rahim lived alone in a small garage at the edge of the city. His days were filled with noise, engines, wrenches, and dust, but his nights were filled with silence. He had no family, no riches, just the memory of his little daughter Aisha, who had died years ago in an accident. He carried her picture in his pocket, close to his heart, every single day. One evening, as rain poured heavily, a luxury car stopped outside his broken workshop. The door opened, and a woman stepped out crying for help. "My car broke down. Please, my daughter's inside. She's sick." Rahim rushed out and saw a small girl in a wheelchair, shivering but smiling through her pain. Her name was Sana. When he looked into her eyes, he froze, because they looked exactly like Aisha's. He fixed the car, but before leaving, the mother said softly, "She hasn't walked since the accident. Doctors say it's hopeless." Rahim just nodded, but inside his heart whispered, "Maybe God sent her to me for a reason." From that night onward, Rahim couldn't sleep. He began working on something secret, using old bicycle chains, motor parts, and steel rods. He wanted to build something that could help Sana walk again. Days turned into weeks. He skipped meals, ignored his own health, and worked till his hands bled. People laughed at him, said he was wasting time. But he believed. He believed in miracles, because once he had prayed for one for his daughter, and never got it. Now maybe he could be someone's miracle. But Rahim was sick and his heart was weak. The doctor had told him, one more week of this stress, and you might not survive. Still, he didn't stop. Finally, one morning, the device was ready. He called the woman and her daughter to his shop. His hands trembled as he adjusted the brace around Sana's legs. He whispered gently, "Just believe, my child. Your legs remember how to walk." She tried and fell. He helped her again. She tried again, and this time she took a step. Then another, and then she walked. Her laughter filled the air like sunlight after a storm. Her mother screamed in joy, falling to her knees, crying uncontrollably. Rahim smiled through tears. His dream was complete, but suddenly he fell to the floor. Friends, sometimes angels don't come from heaven. They come from broken garages, tired hands and kind hearts. Rahim may have left this world, but his kindness will walk on forever, through the steps of every life he touched. So if this story reached your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where stories breathe emotion, where hearts heal, and where kindness lives forever.